Hi everybody, how are you tonight? Pretty good shape, I hope? It is 10:30 and it is time for Nightcap. Well, what's the big thing? What's the big thing going? We saw, obviously, what does this mean? What does that mean? I have no idea. Ah, okay, now we're good. So, hey, I told you 4 weeks ago I was new to this, so that's all right. And besides, you know, Facebook doesn't always want to cooperate, so that happens sometimes. Here we are. So the week, the last few days have given us a lot of excitement and a lot of things to talk about. Obviously, first thing was the Super Bowl that we saw yesterday. How excited were you about the Super Bowl as far as the two teams that were in it? There was one strike against them right there. Two of the worst teams last year, two of the biggest surprises that were both like 60-1 to win the Super Bowl. And as it turned out, they both got in it. And Seattle just absolutely baby spanked the New England Patriots. Of course, as a Buffalo Bills fan, nothing made me happier than that, to see the Patriots lose. I just wish it would have been the Bills who got to beat them up beforehand. But that didn't happen. Other thing that was interesting, of course, was the halftime show. There were more comments about this halftime show than ever before. We know that for a fact. I mean, it was definitely a halftime show that, what would you say, 70% of the population had really strong feelings about it. 30% didn't watch it at all. They went to the other one. Maybe, I guess that tells you their strong feelings. The Turning Point USA halftime show, they said, was really good. The music was great. And, of course, it was all in English. There were people who said the Bad Bunny halftime show was really, really great. It was all in Spanish. Now, how did it hit you? Let me tell you how it hit me. It hit me like this. I did not understand a word. And I just kept, looking at Linda and saying, honey, are you getting anything out of this? And I said, it's pretty. It's visual for sure. And the dancing looks good. And my goodness, there's a wedding going on there. A guy got down on his knees, showed her the ring, and then next thing you know, they were getting married. And it all happened in about a minute. And then, of course, Lady Gaga was there. Ricky Martin was there. Bad Bunny fell through the roof of a house down into a living room and then ran out. And here come a whole bunch of people with flags. And he mentioned the name of every country, including the United States, that were in the Americas. And of course, it was his homage to Puerto Rico. And then the accolades and the condemnations started pouring in. Facebook was full of them. X was full of them. Every social media platform was full of them, both ways. And then I saw some today, made me think a little bit. Now, I told you that I just wasn't totally impressed because I didn't understand a bit of it. And then I saw that a friend of mine reposted a message someone put up there about what all it truly was and how those of us who didn't understand Spanish missed it. And I thought, well, this explains it. And after I read that and I read his explanation of what we saw, I thought, if he just would have said, hello, America, this show is going to be all in Spanish, but it truly is all about love. And even if you don't understand it, enjoy the music, enjoy the dancing, and the show we're going to put on. And you know, that would have made probably a great deal of difference to almost bring that up to about 50-50 on who liked it and who didn't. I know that I would have heard that. I would have paid more attention maybe. And after I read what this post said, I put up a message and I said, you know, if we just would have gotten that little bit of a notice, I think we would have been a lot happier with it. So I went full circle. I enjoyed it. But I still didn't understand a bit of it. But I enjoyed the visual part. So that was that. Hi, Barb. Saw Randy on there too. Nice to see you guys. Always count on you. Wally, I know you're watching too, even though you don't put anything up, but I know you're there. Also, and whoever else is there, thanks for being part of it. And I tell your friends to join in. Maybe they got a comment they want to put up. I'm seeing them. What else can we talk about? Oh, yeah. Okay, so we've gone through, we've talked about the halftime show. Let's talk about the commercials. What was your favorite commercial? Do you realize that more than a dozen of the commercials were virtually all AI produced? And probably more than a dozen, maybe close to half, had AI influence in it. So that was something. Forgive me. The frogs are out every Monday night, it seems. The interesting thing about utilizing AI is that you can utilize AI and it can be a wonderful thing. Or you can utilize AI and you can just make it awful, disgusting, nasty. Case in point, today. Today I saw, and you might have seen it too, a Facebook post that talked about the injured player for the U of I, Kylan Boswell, that said Kylan Boswell went to this animal shelter and knew they were in trouble, and he went and walked through and saw 39 animals, and he went to the back of the room and he saw an 11-year-old lab, and he said, I want this one, and they made an instant connection, and he not only adopted the lab, but he also brought back the next day truckloads worth of mattresses and bedding and new kennels and food and all kinds of stuff, and said, I'm taking care, I'm going to pay for all of this. Every one of these are going to get guaranteed an owner. Well, Kylan, that was a very, very generous thing if you had done it. And I say if you had done it because he didn't. And the reason I know that is directly below Kylan's message, that was AI generated, obviously, was some guy from Nebraska, the very same story, word for word. And below that was a third one. And I don't know where this guy played and who he was, but there were three, all the same, every single word. So here's what I think. I love Kylan Boswell. I love to watch him play, and I'm so grateful he came back from Arizona, of all places, who played tonight, Arizona, and came back to finish his career at Champaign, where the U of I, and he's done a great job like he did last year and so far this year until he was injured. But, you know, it was demeaning for someone to put that up and claim that he did it, because when we all find out he didn't, some people are going to say, oh, what a joke, he didn't do that. But he didn't put that up either. And he's probably as irritated about it as you and I were, or at least I was. So that's that. So AI is a bit of a problem. But AI doing commercials and making some pretty cool things, like that baby eaglet riding on the back of that Clydesdale, you know that eaglet was put on there through AI. And the full-grown adult eagle was put on there due to AI, but it still made a great commercial, and it made a great message, even though, as some people said, it was hokey, and it brought a tear to the eye of the farmer and this and that. It was okay. It was still very good, and hokey didn't matter. The commercial with Bowen Yang and John Hamm and Scarlett Johansson, that was pretty good. There was some AI involved in there, and a whole lot of AI all the way through. But if you want to put in there what you thought your favorite favorite commercial during the Super Bowl game was, I'd be glad to see it. Or you can text me. We do that too, 217-710-1258. Real easy, and that phone is right here within my reach. So, the other interesting thing, I mentioned Arizona. Arizona, the #1 basketball team in the country, just lost to Bill Self's Kansas Jayhawks, playing there at Fall Allen Fieldhouse, and it was 82-78 after Arizona had literally led the entire first half, but Kansas went ahead finally by 1 and then kind of stayed ahead pretty much all the way through. I think there was one towards the end, with maybe only about 4 minutes ago, was the first time there was a 2-possession lead, and Kansas got that. So, which meant they were up by at least 4. So it was a heck of a ball game, and Kansas came back and won 82-78. So #1 is no longer undefeated, and #9 Kansas will probably move up 2 or 3 spots, but it's probably also unlikely that Arizona, because they are so good, unlikely that Arizona is going to drop down from #1. That's that. Now, we've talked about the Super Bowl. The other good news is the fact that the trucks are rolling down to Roger Dean Stadium, and it will soon be baseball time. Pitchers and catchers reporting here in just a couple more days, and spring training will officially be underway. And the Grapefruit League first games will be coming up right around the 1st of March, I believe, maybe even the last day or 2 of February. I forgot to check that. I'd seen a date on it earlier. But that's what's coming. Okay, now I said that I was going to tell the story tonight of the origin, the history of Passport to Stardom. In my mind, maybe the #1 accomplishment of what I had able to do in all the years I was here at WSMI. Although I must say, these last 14 years, being back after being gone for so long, I will say that this has been maybe my happiest time, and still is. It is a joy and a privilege to be on every afternoon from 1 to 5. Now, Passport to Stardom. There was a time when I was away from radio. I was selling swimming pools for kayak. That started in 1988. I had a really good season with them my first year, and kayak was making some changes. They had 31 offices around the country, and swimming pool was expensive. The swimming pool was on average around 14 or 15,000 for the smallest pool, and this was not buy it for 14 and get it for 5 if you hung around for 3 or 4 hours. It was a terrific swimming pool. It weighed a lot of weight. It weighed about 2,500 pounds, and it was all aluminum, and it was great. I could go on and on about how great it was because I sold them for 33 years after all. But the bottom line is they did not expect people really to walk into a pool store and buy, spur of the moment, a $15,000 to $30,000 swimming pool. And that's what they were even back in 1988. because they had a 30-year, 100% warranty, and they lasted a long time. And there's a lot of 50-year-old kayaks people are still swimming in. The point is, I went to Buffalo to be Kayak's national sales manager, one of 6 national factory sales managers. They closed all the stores. They were all in strip plazas primarily. They closed all the stores, and what happened was they just basically were selling pools all the time in the home anyway. There was not much point to have the stores. So I was running 6 territories, 6 offices, so to speak, that were not offices anymore, but 6 market areas from the factory in Buffalo. And I did that for about 3 years. One night, one of the other guys who was a friend of mine, in fact, he was the guy who hired me to work out of the St. Louis office in May of 1988. He said, John, he said, you cannot imagine what's going on at this particular bar in Buffalo, New York is where we were, West Seneca to be exact. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, they are singing. There is this thing called karaoke. You've got to see it. So I went one night with him and had so much fun. I looked at him and I said, he was a musician and a DJ as well before he got into the pool business. And I looked at him, Ron, and I said, Ron, you and I have got to do this if we ever get back to the Midwest. He was from around Granite City. He was from Belleville, and of course I was around here. So in 1991, Kayak reorganized and basically filed bankruptcy and took a hiatus and did not reorganize and get back going again for a couple of years. And then they did. But that left us for a period of time without a job. So I came back. My family came back. I came back. I was working at a radio station in Greenville, and I was learning to be a crafts dealer on the Alton Bell, and worked that for a little while. And when I finally left the radio station, before I'd gone to the radio station, I was working at Greenville Ford Mercury. I mean, you had to do things, when you come back. So I was working at Greenville Ford Mercury, and I got a good relationship with the owner. And I told him, I said, I'd really like to do some karaoke. And he said, well, what would you need? And I said, well, about $1,500 to get started. And he said, I'll loan it to you. He said, if you want to do that, and you want to do that as well as help us, because it'll help you sell cars, probably. And I said, well, that would be great. So I got my system, and I started doing karaoke down there around Greenville. I was doing it in Vandalia. And finally, I got a chance to do it up here in Litchfield. And then eventually I wound up moving up here to Litchfield. But I was doing karaoke 6 nights a week. This will skip ahead a couple of years. I was doing karaoke 6 nights a week. 6 nights a week in Litchfield, and then somewhere different every Saturday night. At the time, say roughly 1992, late 92, early 93, I was doing karaoke 3 nights at John Henry's Outpost. I think Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday. I was doing karaoke 2 nights a week at Boomer's. That was Tuesday and Thursday. And I was doing karaoke at the Passport on Friday. And then on Saturday, I was places. I was Vandalia, I was Grand Fork, I was Highland. I was just all over the place. And for a time, I was also at Highland every Thursday night at a place called Marx Brothers. Did that for years. But Yojo, who owned the Passport, Yojo and I were talking. I had a good relationship with her. I had a good relationship with Hayward Talley, who owned the radio station. because obviously I had worked for him, not once, but a couple of times by this point, maybe 3, not just 2. But I said, Yo, Joe, I said, we could take this up a level and maybe do something really special if I can talk to Mr. Talley and you would be amenable to it. We can have this as the greatest karaoke show in the world. And she was intrigued by that, and she said, what do you mean? And I said, we can put it live on the radio. And I said, we're at a position where you and I and Mr. Talley, the 3 of us, are in a spot where no other 3 people could possibly do this. But because of my relationship with you and with him, we can make this happen. So she said, well, what do you think it would cost? And I said, well, I'll let you know. So I went and talked to Mr. Talley, and I said, Hayward, I said, I would like to do something that's never been done, and I think it will be an incredible boon and an accomplishment for the radio station. And I know we have the technology to do it. And that is, I would like to buy 2 hours on Friday night from 10 to midnight, and I would like to do karaoke live on the radio. And he looked at me shocked, because he thought, well, I never heard of such a thing. And I said, Hayward, we broadcast basketball and football and baseball with our Marty electronics portable transmitter and antenna. I said, it's analog, it's live, just boom, right there. I said, there is no reason why we couldn't do it for music inside a building. And he said, no. He said, we could do it. I said, well, how much do you think it would cost? What would you charge me to buy 2 hours from 10 to midnight on Friday? And he said, well, I'll do it for $75 an hour, or $150. I said, okay. I said, if it all goes well, we can start this in about 2 weeks. Now, this is about, I would say this is about 1996, 95, 96, right in there. And I told Hayward that I thought that we can make this work, and he said, I know we can make it work. And so I went and talked to Yo Joe, and I said, Yo Joe, you're already paying me $150 every Friday night. And we've got good crowds, we've got good singers, we can have a lot of fun, but I think we can fill the place up if we do this. And I said, it will take another $150, so it'll cost you $300 every Friday night. Now, bands were getting more than that, so this was not exactly too much money. And Yo Joe had the great idea to charge admission. So her husband Larry would sit at the front door, and just $1, that's all. But basically we were covering the extra money for the radio every Friday night just by that $1 admission, because we'd draw 150, some nights close to 175 to 200. It was jam-packed in there because people thought, wow, this is amazing. This is our own little Grand Ole Opry. So we brought the Marty electronics out. We got the antenna. We were able to basically safely install it where it could stay all the time. It wasn't a lot of effort to haul it in and bring it out and back and forth. So it worked out really well. It sounded good. And we started the first one, and we promoted it on the air. We even made up certificates. I think we probably wound up printing about 500 certificates before it was all done. Easily 500 different people had sang on the radio. And they came from all over. We had people that came not only from Litchfield and Hillsboro and Nokomis and Gillespie and Carlinville. They came from Springfield. They came from Metro East. There were people that would be driving on the interstate and hit the search button on their radio, hear an opening to a song, maybe by Waylon Jennings or by Willie Nelson, and they think, oh good, I like this song, and then boom, here comes this voice they've never heard before, maybe good, maybe bad, and they would come in just to see what was going on. Would get off at exit 52 to see what Passport to Stardom, live karaoke on the radio, was all about. And that's how it started, and that's how it stayed for about 7 years. Now, the only thing that happened that made it go away was at about the time that it was, as I say, about the end, in maybe 2003 or so, somewhere around there. I have all the exact dates written down, and that's the last thing I thought was going to be important. But there was a particular time when the Cardinals, the baseball Cardinals, who we used to advertise, we used to carry their games way back in the 50s, but back when they were on a station in St. Louis called KWK. But since KMOX got it, we were so close to St. Louis, KMOX basically took it away from us as an affiliate, and they would never let us carry the Cardinal games. You couldn't Springfield, you couldn't Taylorville, but Litchfield was too close. But when KTRS 550 in St. Louis got it, that was a different story, because KTRS did not have a great nighttime signal. And hey, when are most of the games played? Except for some Saturdays and Sundays and occasional businessman specials. Baseball games are played at night when people can come. So they always play on Friday night. That's never an off day. And we were on the air on Friday night. So the Cardinals came in. Mark Lamping, who was president of the Cardinals at the time, came in. Terry recognized him right off the bat and went up to talk to him. And Mark Lamping explained to Terry what they were there for. He took him in to see to see Hayward. Terry explained why he was there. Then Mark started talking, and that was pretty much the end of that. The Cardinals bought the time for the Cardinal games, and they paid a lot of money, a whole lot more than $75 an hour for 2 hours on Friday night. They basically owned the radio station from about 6:30 on, basically every day. And, of course, the weekends and the daytime. When the Cardinals were on, they were on WSMI. So that meant that there would be no more Passport to Stardom on Friday night. And it had to be that way because, well, it had to be that way because there was, like I say, there was never any off day on a Friday. And we didn't have another night. We couldn't really do it on Saturday night because I was already booked somewhere different every Saturday. And we couldn't do it on Sunday. That didn't make much sense because the station was operating on a bit of a skeleton crew on Sunday. Nobody was there at night. So basically that was just the end of it. That was it there. But having said that, people would say, Tobin Ott told me, anytime I'd ever talked to Tobin after he had left the radio station, he said anytime he went somewhere, people would always say to him, they'd always ask about two things. He said they'd always ask about Night Rock, and they'd always ask about Passport to Stardom. So, two very iconic programs on this wonderful radio station, WSMI. We just had our 75th anniversary. We've had a president come through town and we got the interview. We've had, like we said, we've had some great musicians in town. We've had concerts by the Robinson Brothers. We've had so many great things that happened in Litchfield and on our radio station. And hopefully they don't stop. We're 75 years strong. And I don't know what the next big thing is going to be, but there'll probably be one, and I hope I'm around another few more years enough to see it. As far as what is happening karaoke-wise these days and bands, You know, it used to be at one time, way back in the 70s and 80s, there were so many bars in Litchfield. There were so many people that were out socializing in the evening. It was not uncommon to have 5 or 6 bands playing on Saturday night, and probably 2 to 3 on Friday night. All the time, something was going on. But little by little, the number of bars that were open slowed down. They weren't open anymore. We're down to just a trickle of what there used to be. And you know, the laws are different. There's a lot more scrutiny in terms of people out drinking, and obviously the number of police watching for them and the technology they use, it's all different. It's also much stronger, much more prevalent than what it was at that time. So a lot of those things killed it. Not as much karaoke as there used to be either. I know that after I used to do it 7 nights a week, now I do it twice a month at the Eagles in Litchfield, first and last Saturday, so I don't have to move equipment. It's there. But first and last Saturday, we still have a good time. And there's a lot of memories, and we talk a lot about back when we used to do this. And right now, there's a lot of people who do karaoke, so it kind of got spread out, and it kind of got, well, there's a word, and I can't think of what it is right now, but it's blended. It's blended all over. But then again, still fun to sing. Still an awful lot of fun to get out and either A, go with your friends, impress your friends, have strangers come up and tell you what a great job you did. That's the real joy of singing, even if you're not in a band. But if you ask the bands, they'll say karaoke killed the bands. And to a certain extent, that probably is true. It certainly slowed them down. Because I remember at one time, and again, we're going back into the 70s and the 80s. I remember at one time when a great local band in Litchfield, Midnight Madness, was playing 5 or 6 times a week. They were playing Chaps, they were playing John Henry's, they were playing Hillsborough, playing Gillespie and Carlinville, all over the place. Thank you, Don. I'm glad you listened, and I'm glad you remembered. And gosh, every Friday, I know, while you were doing maintenance, it was a great thing. We'd have people call in from the jails. People would call in from the prison and request a song. Tom Williams was the engineer at night when we were doing Passport to Stardom, and he'd text me. Or not text me, but he'd leave a message after he'd get a phone call. Of course, they would call collect, and when the operator would say, will you accept a collect call from Bon Jovi? You know, so they wanted to hear Bon Jovi or request a particular song. And sometimes they'd say, go Passport. So it was always something. And we just had a great time. We had a great time, and that time probably will never come back again, but it was certainly one for the ages. So whether you're watching this little get-together from Litchfield or Hillsborough or Dallas, Texas, or wherever you happen to be, hi, young Tony Marty, how are you doing? I hope Livia is in bed asleep by now. We enjoy what we do. And the radio station has been such a treasure for so many people. And I hear about it every day. You know, when I'm on there from 1 to 5 in the afternoon, people don't realize that my phone's constantly going off from texts coming in from people saying, John, I'm listening from here. Or that was a great joke, or I didn't hear that. That's what makes me go. And that's why I always say to people at the end of the show, I say, you're the fuel that drives this little shindig we do in the afternoon. And I couldn't do it without you, and I couldn't. Why it would be boring, it wouldn't be fun. But when I know that there's people out there, and I know there's people listening who expect me to be on my toes, every mistake I make, by the way, is planned. You have to know that. I wish I could say that's true. Sean, of course, Sean and I have our little get-together at 1:40. We always have a good time. One of these days, we'll figure out how to do that live and make sure that's out there available. We just have so much fun. Well, now the texts are coming in after they hear that story, so I got to put my glasses on so I can read this. When you're on the radio and you've got 4 hours to fill, there's just so much that you can do. And when I say that, there's so much you can do, and there's also so much you can't do. So you have to be careful. You can't cuss. You can't be terrible. You can't be bad. You can't be mean. Try not to show what political side I'm on, but just talking about the halftime show probably made 15 or 20 people a little upset with me because, and it might have even switched in the middle, since at first I said I didn't like it, and then I said after I realized what it was, then I said I did like it. So the ones who thought I was great thought I was bad, and then, vice versa. So anyway, that's pretty much that. Well, we've worked it out here. We've talked about 30-some minutes. How many? About 35 minutes. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Did want to mention to you what's coming up on the show this week, next week, and all the way through the month of February. And by the way, I want to thank very much our good friend Steve Doherty, the owner and manager of the West Side Cinema in Litchfield. Steve, of course, is a big booster of this, as well as our radio show. And thank you, Steve, for sponsoring this nightcap. Also, coming up on Wednesday. Wednesday, we'll have a great visit with Joe Zoller. Joe Zoller and Gary Bray. They're both members of the Knights of Columbus Council number 699 in Litchfield. The Knights of Columbus, a great service organization, is the oldest continuous service organization since 1904. The oldest continuous service organization in Litchfield. There have been others that maybe started earlier that have gone by the wayside and then maybe restarted and gone again. But the Knights of Columbus have never left, never stopped serving the people of Litchfield. They are so much more than the Tootsie Roll sales. Believe me, they are so much more. And Joe and Gary are going to be on Wednesday at 3 o'clock, about 3:10. And we'll talk about the origin of the Knights of Columbus, how it was started, and also the things they do in Litchfield. Fish fries coming up. First one will be February 18th. And people always love their fish fries, and it's very good. And there's great Knights of Columbus organizations around the area. And we're going to talk to the one in Litchfield, to Joe and Gary, on Wednesday at 3:10. Also, the next week, not on Wednesday, but on Tuesday, I'm looking forward to this. We're going to have a visit from Tom Emery. Tom Emery, a tremendous historian, has written a book. He's written a book about Illinois and its connection with the Revolutionary War. Well, we obviously weren't one of the 13 original colonies, but there was a lot of Illinois in the Revolutionary War. Also, you need to know that the following Wednesday, we'll have Jim Marcacci on. He'll be on at, I think it's 3:10 in the afternoon. Tom Emery will be on 2:10, but Jim and Joe and the guys will be on at 3:10. Jim Marcacci will be on talking about his new book that he and John Euban wrote called Beneld and the Booze Gang. Mafia, Murder, and Mayhem along Route 66. It is a fascinating book. I've read about half of it in an earlier galley back a couple of years ago, and I just can't wait to see the finished product. The book is beautifully done. The cover looks great, and what's inside is just absolutely fabulous. I hope you enjoyed tonight. Get plenty of sleep, everybody. Tomorrow's going to be a beautiful day with temperature maybe even 60 with a lot of sun. I certainly hope that's the case. And sleep tight, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on the radio, and we'll talk to you next Monday night at 10:30 right here on Nightcap. Good night, everybody.